Well, hello there. This is Shane from Shane's Books and Review, and I hope you are having a great day today. What will we be talking about today? There's a series we've been covering: Multitude, Singularity, and now Amplitude. Amplitude was wrote by Dean M. Cole. It was narrated by Julia Whalen and R.C. Bratcher. The narrations have been good and evolving through all three books. So you'll see things in the third book that you didn't see in the first book and the second book whenever it comes to the way the narration styles have been done and the production teams. I don't know if people got switched around, but the voices are the same and it's well done. I really like the narrations between those two. A bit of chemistry, even if they're not in the same room whenever they're recording or whatever, but the voices, they lend to each other very well. And I guess that it's just that the actors and actresses are pulling from their own experiences and imagining this world, because it's such a fantastic story. Just a small tidbit of information for you, just in case you weren't aware. There is going to be a fourth book where this was a trilogy. Now there will be four. Also, if you happen to get the audiobook version of it, you know, whenever you hear the end credit and it's like, okay, this is learned behavior, I need to switch off now. Don't switch off. There is a goldmine of the narration after the point. It's just a blooper reel, really. And then there's also a note from the author about this, and this, which is pretty cool. So a short wrap up of the story here. Where are we? What happened? In the first one, boy meets girl, end of the world, dystopia, has to save her in order to save himself and humanity. Okay? But he didn't know that, and it just so happened to work out that way, which was really cool to see and interesting to experience. On the second story, we find out some very interesting things. Were introduced to the primary reason why things are happening the way they are. Not only will we find out some of the primary moving factors, there's also like a story within a story within a story. It's not necessarily Inception. There's these interesting things that happened to Vaughn and to Angela. Vaughn in the last book had to come to terms with himself and what he needed to do and how to progress, and had to learn to adapt and grow as a human. So there was character development on his part. Angela had to put faith into somebody, which was something that she usually doesn't do, I'm guessing, but it doesn't really come off that way in the other books. She seems to be a very hopeful, trustworthy, and giving trust individual, but she also has to learn how to depend on herself to get past the imposter syndrome. I am here because I am this good and I can do this. Now we get to the meat of the story, where this is why things are happening, and them having to go back and loop until they finally figure out a way to get through. The looping wasn't necessarily something that was designed to teach them a lesson. Shut up, Verizon. It wasn't necessarily something that taught them a lesson or was designed to teach them a lesson, but they learned all kinds of things about themselves as they were going through this. And then eventually hitting the master big boy button, the red shiny button that shall not be pressed, they entered some programming and caused the collider to overload and stop that loop and put them back to right after the first thing happened. You know, we had the love story in the first one. The second story was a survival story for sure. And now in the third book, how do we get past all this? There's dimensional beings that as soon as they sense a wormhole that is stable being opened, then they invade and take all the resources. Okay, this story's been done before, but kind of not in this way. So that was an interesting thing. And we found this out in the second book. So if you read the second one, you haven't spoiled anything. Whenever we get to the actual crux of the situation, Angela and Vaughn end up picking up a ragtag team. So much so that they ended up with a computer engineer, a nuclear physicist, somebody that had the ability to get into DARPA. And it wasn't like a convenience type of a writing either. The places that they set up and called and talked to and gave instructions to, these are the sorts of places that would have access to those. And you know what? Kudos to the writer, because even though parts of the story are so outlandish, it's sci-fi, it's supposed to be outlandish, the story, with the way that it was wrote, none of it was convenient for the characters. There was equal loss and there was equal opportunity. There was equal struggle for all the characters that were involved, including one of my favorites, Bob. It was one of those things that the story, the way that everything was laid out, they had to work to get to where they were going to be. And if they hadn't put in the legwork, if they hadn't actually tried, everything would have fell apart. And so it wasn't lazy writing, and the story could have gone multiple ways because of the way that it was wrote. And that's enjoyable. I've been surprised by several writers here lately, and I think Dean M. Cole is one of those. But this story, the conclusion was a conclusion, and it could have been left off right where it was, but at the end of the audiobook, it very clearly says that there's going to be a fourth one. As far as favorite reads this year, this is going to be on the top shelf for me. Whenever I was talking about Bob while ago, and I said he was one of my favorites, he is for a reason. The reason being that character overcomes a lot in the course of his very short lifespan. And no, he doesn't die. It will make sense whenever you read it. But the amount of detail and thought that went into that one character was really good. There wasn't a overabundance of information. It was just enough so that whenever you read it, you get it. Now, of course, Vaughn, he's starting to get past his identity issues of, in the first book, I'm an absolute slacker. Oh crap, maybe I need to step my game up and stop being a maximum output, minimum effort individual. This is not doing me so good. To, in the second book, being overconfident and then having a big sucker punch and having to suck it in. And then in this last book, he goes through a realization of, I can be in control, I can take charge, and it's not going to be end of the world as long as we keep ourselves in check. And so it was good to see him have yet another one of those moments of self-discovery and growth. Angela, she was a interesting character because in the last book I kind of found her just a little bit annoying in the second book because it was all this question this. On the same token, whenever the character is like that through the entire book and not a daggone thing is actually explained, that's bothersome. But it wasn't weak writing on Dean M. Cole's part either. No, indeed not. Actually, I'm sure it took a lot of strength for him to do that with that character and not spill the beans. So, I mean, it was a choice, and it was well done. It was well executed because it gave me angst and mislike of that character, even though I really do like Angela's character altogether. What was some of the feelings that I had with it while I was reading it? Well, much like in the last two, speculation, but this time mysterium, because I know the mysteries kind of, but there's still, every time that there's one thing that's opened, there's another question that comes right behind it. Something else was hope. I was really hoping that the characters were going to be able to pull everything together so that they could have a good and normal life again. On top of the hope and that, there was a bit of laughter because there was a new comedic device that was entered into. So we get to the question, is this book worth your time, efforts, and energy? The answer is yes. It's well wrote, the dialogue is natural but good, the storyline is unique and quirky, there's enough comedic relief in such a horrible experience that it is very much well worth going through with them, and you get sucked into the story. It feels like you're there because there's just enough to let you formulate your own stuff on it. So well done. It's much enjoyed. If I was Shia LaBeouf, I can never say his name right. Shia LaBeouf. Here are the most interesting things we found this week. Thank you so much, Zach, for putting that on the screen. Also, thank you to each one of you for your comments. It's very much appreciated. We've made it. You are my rock star. Thank you so much for watching all the way through to the end. You don't know what it means to me that you've stuck it out that long. Very cool on your part. Thank you so much. At this point, you know what to do. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them down there. I would love to know. Also, like, share, subscribe. This is Shane from Shane's Books and Review. I'm not sure which one of these videos over here that YouTube's going to want you to watch, but if you pick one of ours, I will see you in the next video.